Good morning. Hello, and welcome to the Patent Literacy Symposium and this session, Too Important to Fail, Implementing Literacy Instruction Changes During the Pandemic. My name is Sherry Hartman, and I'm joined by my colleague, Lauren Lutz. We are excited to facilitate this session for everyone. Before we start, we have a few housekeeping items to review. You can access presenter handouts, the presenter bio, and the conference schedule on the Patent website, and the link will be provided in the chat. And just as a reminder, this session will be recorded and is 75 minutes in length. To access closed captioning, click on the icon CC Live Transcript on the Zoom control panel. If you experience technical difficulties, please go to the Technical Support Guides area above the schedule on the symposium page. Please keep your video feature off and stay muted to eliminate any potential distractions during the presentation portion of our session. And because this is a webinar, microphones have been muted for your video, and your video feature has been turned off. We would love for you to tweet or share out on social media all you are learning from the Literacy Symposium. The hashtag for the symposium is #PatentLit2022. And now we would like to introduce Dr. Chris Caton.
Good morning, everyone. So it looks like we have about 23 participants, which is nice. I would really like this to be as informal a session as we possibly can. This session will probably look different than a lot of the sessions that you are planning on attending. First of all, it's going to be small. They put me up against Carol Tolman in another room, and she's a powerhouse, so I get it. But what you can expect here today is really a story. It's the story of a small district who found an opportunity in the face of some real difficult times. My hope is that through talking that out, we can come up with some solutions for everyone. Will allow all of you to reflect on where you are and where you want to go, and have some conversations about what worked, what didn't work, and an understanding that, frankly, I don't think any of us have it all figured out. And so in the effort to be pretty informal, you are all unmuted, and so at times we might ask if you have questions. You can feel free to put those in the chat all of the time, but again, there are a small number of us here, so I think that having some conversation is not a bad thing. Additionally, I'll just be asking for some information from all of you to see who's in the room in a couple of minutes, and I want to make this as meaningful for each of you as possible. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen here, and we'll get that up and going.
Hey, Chris, do you want me to allow them to turn on their microphone with that so that they can talk to you, or would you like them to stay muted? It's up to you.
I believe Sherry did that. No?
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah, I checked to mute them.
Okay.
Excellent.
Perfect.
So again, who am I? My name's Chris Caton. I am currently the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at the Northgate School District. My Twitter handle is right there. In the future, if you would like any of this slide deck, if you have further questions, if you want to talk about anything that we talk about today, you can just hit me there and we can have that conversation moving forward. The title of this is Too Important to Fail. And that's how I feel about the situation that we were in 2019 going into 2020, when we had an opportunity that kind of got threatened. And all of us were very much in the same boat, in a place where the pandemic changed a lot of our plans, forced us to reimagine what we're doing. But we were in the process of something that I thought was really important at the time. It was an opportunity, and it was an opportunity that I wasn't willing to let go. And fortunately, I had a team of people around me who made an effort to keep the process moving forward despite some real challenges. So very quickly, I want to see who's in the room and I want to test the chat. Could all of you just use the chat very quickly and just put your current role? So I would just put director of curriculum. If you're a third grade teacher, if you're a reading specialist, if you're a special ed director, just throw that in the chat. I want to get used to looking at the chat. I want to put it in a place on my screen that is effective for me. And that will help me out in gauging who is here and getting all set. Excellent. So this is, as I said, a story about a journey. And so now just to sort of gauge where everyone is in their journey, just give me a 1 to 5 in the chat. 1 being, we need to get started. We are finding ways to move forward, but we're not really even moving yet. And 5 is we have this literacy thing all figured out, and we have it nailed. So where are we? 1 to 5. Excellent. I see a lot of 3s, a 1, some 2s, but I'm here to tell you that we're not a 5. We're definitely not a 5. We began this literacy journey just a couple of years ago, and it's been a tumultuous couple of years. And so we're still growing. We're still trying to figure this out. And as we do try to figure it out, we're just trying to get better all the time. So let me just tell you a little bit about me as we get started. I began at Northgate just 3 years ago. And so I started there in the summer before the pandemic. And so my July and August was just getting a feel for the place. And as a new administrator, I thought, I'm going to spend this first year really getting to know people, building relationships. We're not going to enact any major change this first year. And then I had a very interesting first year. But my background began as a middle school English teacher. I wanted to start my career and teach kids the love of literature, how to write, and just be on fire for reading. And in that position, I realized very quickly that I had a lot of students who just couldn't read at a level that was going to allow them to love reading and to love writing at the level that I wanted them to. And the other thing that I learned very quickly is that no part of my training as a secondary English teacher prepared me for teaching my students how to read. And so in my second year of teaching, I began to pursue a master's degree in reading and became a reading specialist. My district shifted me over 3 years later into a reading specialist position at the middle school, which was extremely fulfilling. I loved it. It was interesting to work with secondary students, young secondary students who were struggling readers and see them grow. I then helped create a literacy coaching position that started out half-time and became full-time at my district. I'm a believer in lit coaching. I'm a believer in coaching up teachers and think that teacher training is just incredibly important. So much so that when that position was eliminated, it caused me to leave the district. Now, in addition, while I was at that district, I had a really awesome opportunity. I took part in the first cohort of people in Pennsylvania to be trained as letters trainers. And so I want to point that out as something that was really important in my career and in my pursuit of growing teachers. But I decided to leave the district. A position came up at Slippery Rock University, where I live. And that position was working with struggling and first generation college students to try to build their reading and writing skills for college. That seemed exciting to me in a time when my position was being eliminated. So I took that. It really was exciting. I thought I could do this for the rest of my life. And 2 years later, the grant that created that position was no more, and I was looking for a job. I landed on my feet very quickly at the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, where I became a consultant for literacy and curriculum. Spent 5 years there, and then thought, I need to put my money where my mouth is. I need to go out into a district and try to make this happen. So I took a position at a large affluent school district in the Pittsburgh area in that effort. And frankly, that district just wasn't at a place where it wanted to change. And so sometimes we find ourselves in a place where, things just aren't right. And that was a place that really enjoyed the status quo. And I was in a place where I wanted to build something new, and with the belief that every student needs to learn how to read, and that is our mission. I took a job. I actually followed an assistant superintendent who left to the Northgate School District, where I was told they were hungry for change. The superintendent supported change. And so here we go. So there I was at the Northgate School District. Northgate, even in the Pittsburgh area, oftentimes I get the question, where is that? And it is because it is so small and it is kind of nestled among giants. The Northgate School District is a very small public school district. It borders the city of Pittsburgh to its south. And so here we are right next to the second largest district in the state. And then to our north, we have a bunch of far more affluent, very large suburban districts. And so it's really easy for us to get lost. We're a pretty interesting district in that we're a walking district. We don't have any busing, and that's possible because our entire district is only 2 square miles. There are 2 little boroughs there, Avalon and Bellevue. It's a consolidated district that was consolidated in the late 70s. And these 2 high schools became our elementary schools. And now we have one secondary building that all of our students go to. And that is a total of about 1,000 students, K to 12. And so I'm sure some of you are from much, much larger school districts. I actually grew up going to a district with a graduating class of 27. And so for me, it's plenty big. And so this gives us an interesting setting for the story. It is a very diverse school district. We have over half of our students economically disadvantaged, and about 35% of our students are minority population. And a very important bit here is that there is a fairly new leadership team. And I feel like with all districts, when you talk about a story of change, culture is a big part of creating change or frankly not creating change. As I said before, I was at a district where culture just didn't allow for change. It didn't let change happen. It didn't want change. And so at this district, I found myself in a place where there had been some bumpy roads. They had gone through some leadership where deep changes were made. A quarter of the teaching staff had been furloughed, and they were coming out of a pretty dark place when my current superintendent took on that role. She had been there for a couple of years when I came over, and I am grateful for what she has done in that interim time, beginning to build trust with the faculty. And that was so important to what we began doing there. So there I was, a new curriculum leader. What I found when I landed was a very disjointed approach. Teachers were, frankly, doing their own thing. And that was really no fault of their own. They had not really talked about what they were doing for a long time. There wasn't communication among the teachers about practice. There hadn't been conversation or professional development around the science of reading and what was working or not working with students. And so, no fault of their own, those teachers were all in a place where, frankly, we couldn't even say it wasn't working because no one was paying attention to whether it was working or not. And I know that there are a lot of districts in Pennsylvania that are just like that, a lot of districts across the country that are just like that. So again, it was an opportunity, if not a difficulty. But that lack of professional development was something that, fortunately, I think the teachers were feeling. And they were really hungry for that professional development when we got to a place where we could begin that process. And as I said, this all led to a global pandemic eventually. So we had a couple of things in our favor. Number one is a small school district. So at my previous school district, there were 6 elementaries. And so 4 or 5 teachers in each of those elementaries, 6 elementaries, to turn that, to shift that, that's a lot of people to move. And so in this district, to change kindergarten instruction, it's 5 people in 2 buildings. And so that really created an opportunity for very swift change. The biggest thing in our favor, and I'll tout this over and over again, is the teachers at Northgate. I'm not shy in saying that they're the best teachers that I've ever worked with. They go above and beyond what is asked of them, and they run with it. It's really been so important in our transition, and I can't oversell just the effort that the teachers put in and the care that the teachers have for their kids. I know teachers everywhere care, but I'm telling you, it was special. And what I want to talk about quite a bit that sort of launched us is the PA Dyslexia Pilot. There was an original phase of the PA Dyslexia Pilot a number of years ago, and we ended up in the expansion, in sort of Pilot 2. And that created a situation where we had another impetus for change. So what is the PA Dyslexia Pilot? It was built around Act 69, which required Pennsylvania Department of Education to establish an early literacy intervention and dyslexia pilot using evidence-based screening and evidence-based instruction. And so, as I said, this happened a number of years ago and was executed over 3 years, up to 2018. They found quite a bit of success with the small number of schools that were a part of that original pilot. And so, in a nutshell, what was that pilot? That pilot provided professional development for schools, for teachers, around science of reading, around evidence-based approaches. And then it supported the implementation of a core reading program that was evidence-based, really trying to build that tier 1 in each of those schools, which I believe is so important. And then it ensured that all of the schools were implementing a small group reading intervention that was also evidence-based. And built around all of this was teacher training that Caton was at the center of. And so nod to Caton on this and for the work that they did there. And in addition, the work that they did with us. So here's a little bit of a timeline around the dyslexia pilot. So just very quickly in the chat, how many of you, just yes or no, were aware that there was a pilot program in Pennsylvania that supported instruction towards students with dyslexia? Okay. Thank you. So about half and half. And I imagine if we surveyed statewide, that would probably be just about right for people in our positions. It's something that I think probably should have been, could have been hyped a little bit more, right? Because I think it's important work. And I don't think that it got enough attention. And so right there, you'll see that in 2014, that's when Act 69 was signed, and training began with just 8 schools initially in 2014. And so that, that study took place over 3 years. And in 2019, they released results. Those results fueled the funding for this pilot expansion that really launched in 2019. I submitted an application for this pilot, and Northgate was accepted into the pilot, and there were some delays. The delays happened. I'm not sure exactly why they happened, but we actually didn't begin training until the very, very end of 2019. And so those trainings looked like the kind of professional development I think you would expect around the science of reading, beginning every session with the reading rope and breaking that down into components, talking about the research. And it was the introduction that my teachers really needed. It was work that I had not begun there, just arriving there, really meeting them all at the end of August when they arrived back at school. And this was great for me. It was an opportunity to begin the kinds of discussions that I needed to have with my teachers. And it allowed me to be an expert on the side. And that was really important for me. It allowed me to be the expert on their team. And I am so grateful for that opportunity. And I couldn't have designed the opportunity better. And I would have never thought this way. So my thinking was that I was going to go in and I was probably going to be the purveyor of professional development for my district. And that's the way it would have been without this opportunity. And so what this allowed me to do was to step back and sit at the tables with my participants, with my teachers. And as the sessions were going on, questions would arise. And the teachers would, turn and they would ask those questions. And we probably shouldn't talk during presentations, right? But we do. We're teachers. We're really bad audiences during presentations. And so they would turn and they would ask questions, and it put me in a place where I was able to answer those questions. And it was an opportunity to not only build relationships with people that I was just meeting and just beginning to work with, but allowed me to build the credibility that I needed as a literacy leader within my district, and the person that they can go to for answers when they have questions as we move forward in this effort to change our instruction. And so that's kind of a lesson learned. It was a lesson learned for me that sometimes stepping back and allowing someone from the outside or another person to lead the charge and then just support the charge is sometimes the best way. Sometimes being the presenter makes you the other. And this allowed me to be part of the team instead. And that was really important for me. And it was an aha. So at this point, we began the process of moving from disjointed to aligned. So where were we? Wilson, so Journeys was our core resource. And it had been around for a long time. So the teachers were using Journeys, but as is apt to happen, when something is there for over a decade and has never been discussed or reviewed, even something like Journeys goes off the rails, even for what it is, right? And so as I met with teachers, observed classrooms, people had pulled 1,000 resources from 1,000 different places and had taken bits of Journeys that they liked and were using it. And what was going on in one classroom with Journeys was completely different than what was going on in another place. And the elements of that program even were happening to some degree or not. Now, when I was still at my previous district, the superintendent of Northgate, who I had worked with previously, reached out to me and said, you know, I feel like our primary reading instruction is kind of a mess here. What is your recommendation for a program? And, you know, I told her what I'll say over and over again in this presentation is that I don't think the adoption of a single program is going to fix things. It's a much deeper dive than that. But if I was going to just go out and buy one thing that all of the primary teachers would use, I would probably go get Wilson Foundations and train your teachers up because it could at least start conversations around the science of reading. And so she did that. And when I arrived, what I found was Wilson Foundations was there. And although the superintendent had, with all good intentions, gone out and purchased this product and given it to all of the teachers, there was a culture there of do it if you want. And the training really had no follow-up. And so there were some teachers using Foundations and some teachers not using Foundations. And it wasn't anything with malice. It was just, that's the way it was. If everything was a suggestion. And so there was no alignment even with that. We had no alignment in our interventions. So we are very fortunate. We have very small elementaries, and I have 2 reading specialists at each of my elementaries. And my reading specialists, again, like my teachers, I believe are fabulous. But at that time, it was disjointed. We had one reading specialist who was doing reading recovery and was just dyed-in-the-wool believer in reading recovery. We had 3 other reading specialists doing different. And that's as much detail as I'll go into there because it was, again, disjointed. It wasn't a programmed approach. There hadn't been ongoing training there. And so they were all, frankly, just doing something different. And we were using dibbles 3 times a year, screening our students. But nothing was really being done with that except highlighting the top kids and shipping them to a reading specialist. And teachers were all doing their own dibbles. And in the conversations, it was basically a feeling across teachers that it wasn't worth doing because they were all doing it a little differently. And this person always had scores that looked like this, and this person always had scores that looked like this year by year. And so there wasn't a lot of fidelity and trust in that as a tool to identify kids who might be struggling with reading. And so there we were. And I'm not sure if this sounds familiar to anyone, but having worked at an intermediate unit and having been to a lot of schools in Allegheny County and across the state, this is not crazy talk. As much as it is very disjointed, it is not completely out of the question for many schools to be in this situation. You are all here at a literacy symposium, so I know you're deeply invested and I'm sure you're doing the work. But there are a lot of really well-intentioned people out there who are in situations very much like this every single day. So we began to work towards alignment as part of this effort. And we were working alongside the folks from Caton who were assigned to us as part of this, as part of this dyslexia pilot. And they were a great help. Now, again, one of the things that I believe is that there's really no single approach or single product that is going to fix everything. And so we ended up with a lot of different things. Initially, I really believed that initially we were going to get to a place where we were going to be less purchased programs. But honestly, this became a godsend in the situation that we're in. So I'm gonna just ask you to use the chat right now. Right now, I have a number of purchased programs up here, and one that I would call an approach, not a purchase program. Are these familiar with anybody out there? Which ones do you use? Anybody out there use any of these? Excellent. So Dibbles has come up a little bit there, and I'll talk about how we shifted with Dibbles just very quickly, because it's come up in the chat a couple of times about who delivers Dibbles, and a lot of people do use Dibbles out there. In an effort to bring things online with Dibbles, we did what I came to call a SWAT team approach initially. And so we took our 4 reading specialists and we had them go to one of our elementaries, and as quickly as the 4 of them could, they would converge on a grade level in that one elementary, do that grade level, moving up. And then when the 4 of them were done in that building, they would move to the other building. And we thought that by having our 4 reading specialists conduct all of the Dibbles testing, we would have a much more reliable and consistent approach to Dibbles. And I think that what we found was that was pretty effective. We don't talk about whether we can trust it or not anymore. And that's really what was important, getting beyond that place where where the Dibbles, people would roll their eyes when we would talk about the Dibbles, right, initially. And now it's something that I think we have a lot of belief in, and we have conversations around all of the time. And so as part of the series, we really, again, went to that reading rope, because it's a great way to sort of simplify the conversations around the areas of reading that we want to ensure we're teaching. And Wilson Foundations stayed and became an important part of our core for phonics, certainly. And we insisted on consistency. Really, that was the first thing that we said, is that, you know, how do those who use foundations handle connected text and it's not designed? Here we go. I'll answer that question in just a minute. We looked at foundations, and here is sort of at least part of the answer to the question that just came up in the chat. How do you handle the fact that Wilson Foundations, frankly, is missing pieces, right? There isn't connected text. In early Foundations editions, they dealt with phonological awareness, phoneme awareness, and in current Wilson Foundations, frankly, I don't think it's nearly robust enough. They kind of play at it in places, but it's not there robustly enough or daily enough for me. And so that's why so many pieces here. I had some teachers who struggled with that. Like, why can't we just have one thing? They had careers where in the past, when there was curricular change, they bought them one thing. They bought them journeys. They bought them a series. And frankly, we weren't in a place where that was a thoughtful decision. And so we took foundations and we had conversations around foundations. What is there? What do we like about it? And what is not there? And in those conversations, one of the things that we talked about was phoneme awareness. And Wilson is weak there. And so in comes Hegarty. Now, with Hegarty, I like it. There are a lot of things that are great about it. It's a fantastic routine. Our kids love it. Our teachers believe in it. But even with Hegarty, there are things that if I could wave my magic wand and change about phoneme awareness in Hegarty, I would. I would like to see Alconin boxes and chips moved around a little bit. I like to stay away from letters. Some people are believers in that. But Hegarty was our answer to phonological awareness from Wilson. In terms of connected text, we brought in the practice of word building. Isabel Beck is from Pittsburgh. She taught a lot of folks who have influenced me at Pitt. And I'm a believer in word building as a practice for students to manipulate letters to make new sounds, to make new words. And I believe having connected text with that practice is important. And so we went out and scoured the world for decodable text to align to our Wilson sequence that we aligned our word building to, that we now aligned our decodable texts to. And so our decodable texts are kind of from everywhere. They're from Reading Street, they're from Spire, they're from Primary Phonics, they're from a lot of places, but we made sure that they were truly decodable. And so the spelling patterns were decodable based on the patterns that we were teaching in word building at that time. We cleared up the misunderstanding about what is a low-level text or what is a repeated text compared to what is a decodable text. With our teachers, that was training that we had, conversations that we had. We eliminated some resources that were thought to be decodable that really were not. This is a place that my reading specialist really did some amazing work initially, because we were in a place where we were moving to this at the same time that the pandemic was hitting. And so as we transitioned to this, the teachers were just getting trained up. We were just about to implement word building, sort of large scale. We were doing it, but we were sort of testing the waters with a couple of decodables, and all of a sudden we were going online. And so we needed our decodables to send home with kids. And my reading specialist, again, we scoured the world, we did our best, we've done better since, And we found decodables to send home with the kids, and we were sending decodables home every 2 weeks. How is the word building from Isabel Beck different from the Wilson lessons with word tiles? So it is different in a couple of different ways. One, it's a slightly different protocol, right? And so in this, it is very protocoled, it's very routine. And the importance there is that it comes with these decodable texts. So it has connected text along with it. And so again, was doing this separate from Wilson the perfect decision? I don't know. But it's a practice that I believe in. And it is successful for us. And so if you want more details about that after, I can certainly share that protocol and our scope and sequence and our list of decodables. Again, we just didn't feel like what was in Foundations was rich enough in that area. So we developed more. And all of this, which is important, came out of conversations with the teachers. And so in this process, which was very short initially, we had the conversations around what they were learning, around what we had, and developed our needs. And this is what came out of that. We also had our reading specialists do the training for OG and 3D. And so this brought us in alignment in terms of what we were going to be doing the following year, because remember, we're in November now. Actually, we're in January now at this point when they're doing this OG training. And so we're talking about beginning this the following year, the tier 3 piece. So that was cleaning that up. We had our reading specialist who was a devout reading recovery person. She was not happy with this decision and believed deeply in what she was doing. And so just as a reflection here around working with teachers and trying to understand the difficulty for change. This is a perfect example of a place where I had a teacher who was doing something that was counter to what I thought was best. And it was important for me to understand that this teacher was not doing it because she didn't care. This teacher cares deeply, and she was doing what she thought was good. In fact, this was a teacher that was going to she was going to more professional development than any other teacher in the district, except all of the professional development that she was going to was reading recovery professional development. And so she was drinking the Kool-Aid hard. And it wasn't until we began this that she heard another perspective. So fast forward a little bit, the pandemic begins. Shortly after the pandemic begins, there was an online literacy conference, kind of not unlike this one, but run through another organization. And I asked the teachers to attend that. And the opening session had a presenter who basically focused on the reading wars and was speaking specifically to reading recovery. And the chat went crazy with, I can't believe people are still doing this with all of the science of reading that's out there. And shortly after, this teacher called me very upset and said, I had no idea. And so this is one of those places where we had to know better and then do better. And so one of the things that allowed us to be successful, I think, was a vulnerability in terms of failing forward. So there we were. Here is this progression of things that happened with the pilot. And then March of 2020, after getting about 2 months of professional development, talk, and support around this, our schools closed. And so here we were in this place of attempting to implement really deep change, and all of the sudden we're online. And I'm sure all of you have memories that you're trying to block about what that time period was like, trying to bring all of our instruction online. And it would have been really easy to fall back and say, okay, so now we have to go online. This is going to wait, and we'll figure all of this out later. And in talking with my teachers, I really had a majority decision that said, hey, look, we have to change everything anyway. Let's change it to this. And so we did. We did our best to implement all of this for the first time that these teachers have ever tried any of this online. And it only happened because of their willingness to do it and their dedication to that. So great teachers were at the center of this. They saw this need for change and they embraced it. Like I said, we had a learn better, do better expectation. And so we said, go fail, right? Go do your best. This is an ugly time. We're learning how to conduct lessons via Google Meet. We're corresponding with parents and kids the way we never had before. And that's kind of important at Northgate, because as a walking district, our teachers see the parents and have conversations with the parents every single day after school. So it is a hand-to-hand experience that kind of like, it struck me when I began working at Northgate. Our teachers walk their elementary students outside and hand them off to the parents and talk to them every single day. And so being online was especially different for Northgate teachers who always have this like constant communication with parents face to face. And now that all went away. But one of the most important things is that the teachers supported each other. We began having teacher meetings every single day to talk about this and to plan. As I said before, we were in a place where before this year, teachers weren't talking about their practice. Everybody was sort of existing in a silo. Everybody was kind of doing their own thing. And all of a sudden, we were in each other's living rooms every single day, talking about reading instruction, talking about how we're delivering this online. And it broke through a lot of barriers that I think had previously existed around sharing practice, around talking about what works, and around sharing what you're doing in class. Everybody was planning and doing on their own, and all of a sudden, people were sharing that lift. Administration support was really important in all of this. It was a new administration. We had some new principals. I was new. Our superintendent had only been there for a couple of years. And so I talked about the daily teacher meetings. I think it was important that our administration attended those meetings and put themselves there and took part in those conversations. I think it's really easy to get stuck in, frankly, the administration of all of this and not take part in the conversation around instruction. And this was a time where we had administrators in the virtual room, talking to teachers and helping and trying to answer questions. And if we didn't have, or the principals didn't have the answers, we found them. Supporting failing forward. That idea that, look, it could be ugly. It's not going to be perfect all of the time. It's not going to be perfect the first time. These are new programs delivered in a situation that is not typical. And so we're going to do whatever it takes to just keep this going. And that was a really important attitude for us to have as we sort of like, again, got dirty as we implemented all of this. And the teacher training was so important. The initial teacher training was very important, that came sort of as a mandate of being part of the dyslexia pilot. And the dyslexia pilot became part of that impetus for change. For those teachers that kind of wondered, why are we doing this in this time that it's so hard? Why can't we just quit? And I got to sort of make the excuse, the dyslexia pilot. We have to keep this going because we made this commitment. And that was really important for keeping the momentum and having that additional reason beyond just all of the good reasons for doing great work. We did the reading specialist training that I told you all about for the OG and 3D, and we did ongoing training and support. And so those daily meetings were part planning, part training. We continued to hash out the way the programs were going to work. When we found that a number of our decodable texts, although they aligned in terms of spelling pattern, they were not necessarily appropriate in terms of level for the grade. And so we had to make adjustments, and we're continuing to make adjustments. At the start of this year, we made a number of adjustments in terms of our decodables. And I think it's important that we continue to do that. And I have a colleague who talks about the compelling why with everything. Any change that we make, he talks about trying to develop the compelling why for why we're doing this. And so there were a number of compelling whys for me around this. And someone in one of the initial trainings at Caton talked about this as an effort of dyslexia proofing our system. And so it's an understanding that we have students who have disabilities that we're not always going to catch. And so what we need to do is to develop our instruction so that for those students that we might miss, those students that we might not identify as having a disability, they're still getting the best possible instruction geared for what they need. And we really think that's a target that we're trying to hit, is despite identified learning disability, we're moving students to the places where they're getting the best possible instruction for their need. And that goes for all students, our students who struggle with reading and our students who are successful readers. We really think that the system that we've built is good for all of them. This idea that we're working together to do this, that we're a system and that we're a link in the chain, right? And so as I talk to teachers and we continue to develop, we talk about creating a bubble, and we've created this bubble in our primary grades now. And it's exciting for us to watch this bubble rise up through the grades and make a difference in the upper grades as those students get better. I mean, it's not about test scores, but for what it's worth, our growth on the PSSAs this past year in our early elementary has been what it's never been before at our district. And I really think that these efforts have allowed us to do that. When I look at our current DIBEL scores at the end of this school year, and I see the kind of growth that our students are making, it's exciting. We're creating something now that we're going to feel the ripples of in coming years as those students progress. So what now? This has developed now to be part of what is becoming, I think, a robust MTSS process. This year, again, being back in the building and being as normal as this year was, we completely revamped our schedule so that all of our students are receiving an intervention period. We call it a focus period. And that focus period really is trying to get at this diamond approach, getting all of the students what they need as effectively as possible. And part of this is ongoing meetings, talking about students, looking at data, placing students, and continually changing that placement as needed. It has fueled us to make secondary changes. Our middle school and high school are part of the MTSS program through Caton this past year. We were at year 1. And frankly, the administrators at the secondary are looking down at the elementary and saying, you know, we need to make these changes too, because our kids are going to drive the need for this change. We need to up our game because of the kids who we're getting, and they're going to be different. My message in all of this is that this is too important to give up. What has been accomplished is not something that I think could only be accomplished at Northgate. I know there are probably people on this call who can relate to this, who have done this kind of work in their district. And I just encourage everyone to do this because frankly, I think we're civil rights workers. I think reading is a right that every student should have. And too often our students who come to us already disadvantaged in some way are the kids who miss out. I just think that it is vitally important, the work that you all are doing and that we're doing in our schools to understand what works in reading and to implement that in systems that are effective for all students. And so I hope that this presentation has told a story. I hope that this presentation has provided some hope for some people who are in a place where there is need for growth. And I hope that it has sort of reinforced for you who are making this change in some ways that what we're doing is a collective and we should be able to reach out to each other for support. So thank you all.
And thanks, Chris. Does anyone have any questions?